So this is the Zcam E2M4. It's a micro four thirds system in line with cameras I'm used to using. I'm primarily a wedding videographer. I've been doing this professionally for 10 years. The thing that sold me on the Zcam is it's essentially a glorified GH5S, but with the form factor of a cine body. And that's something I've been wanting to get into for a while now. I know, before you start hating on the micro four thirds system and you don't get the same shallow depth of field as you do with full frame equivalents or APS-C sensors, there are solutions to that. You can use speed boosters. And really the biggest limitation for me has always been low light capabilities. But this particular body is essentially a GH5S, which is known for having incredible low light for its micro four thirds sensor. And so the sensor is just a little bit bigger than the GH5, which is what I'm used to shooting with. It has dual native ISOs, so that once you get past that 2500 mark, that ISO cleans up considerably, moving into some pretty high ISO ranges. I'm not going to go into all the little bit rates and codecs and all the stuff that come along with it, but just know that you can shoot ProRes with it. You can do 4K 120 up to 160. 160 doesn't look the best, but 120 is incredible. It goes up to 240 frames per second. There are some caveats that go with how you use that though. I don't recommend shooting in log for the 240 unless you have special scenarios that you need to match it to grade wise. Otherwise, just the Rec 709 or flat profile is great to work with, but you can get some fringing and some color casting and banding and stuff that you don't really want if you're shooting that 240 with the camera. Working with weddings, I've been getting requests over and over this year that asking if I do live streaming. And there are quite a few options out there for live streaming, but none of them really seemed streamlined enough in order to be part of my working kit. So I ended up going with this primarily because it will pay for itself as an option to upgrade my couples to live streaming. And the live streaming is so incredibly easy. You can hook an antenna into the back of this. It will broadcast to a channel through your phone, and then that's it. You're good to go. It'll also dual record to the camera while it's broadcasting. That way you can still use that as your B cam, C cam during a ceremony. So I'm really excited about that. The live streaming possibilities with this camera are incredible. So starting off, looking at the rig, you might see this and go, that's a lot for a handheld, and you would be right. This is a pretty substantial setup for a handheld, but my methodology has always been the more points of contact I have, the more stability and longer lasting I can be with my shots. I don't use a top handle or even a side handle because I try to keep everything as slim as possible. That way I can quickly go from shooting handheld to shoulder mount rig to Steadicam if I need to. And having an extra handle on top, on the side, makes it more difficult to balance in general. So I'm trying to avoid that. Taking a look at the base here, this is the Edelkrone Pocket Rig. It's something I have used for years now, and I cannot recommend high enough. Edelkrone in general are just incredible engineers. They're constantly pushing cinema to its limits and experimenting with new ideas. No, they don't sponsor me or pay me. I just enjoy their products. So here we have the arm, which comes out, and full disclaimer, everything that you have to use with Edelkrone products, because they are all mechanical, is you have to make sure you do your due diligence to tighten everything, make sure everything isn't gonna come loose during a shoot. So there's a lot of pre-work that goes into making sure your rig is set up the way it needs to function for a full day of shooting. Anyway, so for me, I hold the base here, which is my main point of stability and balance, right underneath the heavy camera body, right there. That's where I really want to be able to hold it. And I can hold it out a bit more onto the rails, but I have options with that. And then here, this is just one extra piece of contact for that support that goes right into the crook of my arm. Then I can take my hands here and I can put my hand underneath this pocket rig here. That way I can just make very small adjustments when I'm shooting. And then everything together looks like this. So I have 1 and then 2 underneath here to stabilize that with this one as well. And if I really want to, I can bring it all the way into my chest and tuck it in like this so that I'm just completely locked down. And then I can shift my torso so that I get really smooth pans and tilts. That's the gist of the base of my camera setup. I do everything modular, so this is on a 501 plate that can come off here. And then I take this off and the whole unit comes off with the follow focus system, because I don't ever want to be without the follow focus system. And then for the Steadicam, I just unhook this, and then I have a CR2 plate, a Manfrotto CR2 plate, which is kind of been overrun by Arca Swiss, but I'm a creature of habit, so that's what I use. But like I said, everyone's system is going to be a little bit different, but this is mine just because I like how modular it is, and I can swap out between my different setups, whether that be on a tripod, on my shoulder rig, or my handheld rig. So looking at the rest of the rig setup, I have a half cage, and this half cage is by Condor Blue, and you can see that it just has a couple side pieces and a top piece, and they all click together like Legos, essentially. There's little rails that come out of the top right here that stick into this plate so that everything is really secure, as well as 1/4-inch screws that go onto the side of the cage. I think it's really streamlined. It's not too bulky of a cage. I love it. One thing I did do, which doesn't come base with the Zcam, is I upgraded the mount. So you can buy an aftermarket mount made by Zcam, which is the Micro Four Thirds locking version. And the other mount, the bayonet version, has a bit of play, and it has more play, at least my mount variant did, with the Zcam than my GH5s by a long shot. If I put my follow focus system on before, you would get a full twist of the lens, which could offset and look like it has extra breathing that the lens doesn't really have. And it just wasn't very desirable. This is rock solid. I even have it adapted to a Metabones adapter, and it works great. Like, there is a tiny bit of movement, but that's not from the mount. That's from the adapter that goes to the lens to make this work on a Micro Four Thirds system. See that? No wobble. See how the lens is not wobbling back and forth as I'm using this follow focus system. It's pretty nice. Pretty nice. Finally, we have the battery, and the battery is actually what charges the Nano Nucleus N, which for anyone new to this cine gear setup and brain setup of cameras, it is one of the most valuable tools you could possibly have. It will upgrade your film making. You are going to force yourself to be more creative because you don't rely on autofocus in any kind of way. You can work with pulling focus. You can set up A and B in and out points for racking focus, consistently get that look that you're going for. F970 battery, which is what this takes, and you can get them in a couple different sizes, the big ones and the smaller ones. Smaller ones I use for Steadicam. But this has a USB coming out of the bottom, which powers my motor right here. And I use this primarily on two different lenses. It's either the 18 to 35 Sigma 1.8 or the 50-100 Sigma 1.8, which is my favorite lens of all time. The very last piece here is going to be the monitor that I use. I just use my phone, and you can hook up a separate monitor to it like the Ninja V, or I have a Field World monitor that's ultra bright for daylight as well, which is a fantastic monitor. But the phone does everything you need it to, and the latency is not severe enough that it won't be a hindrance as you're working. So along with having a handheld unit, you really kind of need to have a shoulder mount, depending on what kind of work you're doing. Something like this allows you to use longer lenses, like that 50-100 Sigma 1.8. And so this will let you mount it and be able to shoot all day. Like I said, again, this is a 501 plate. So it just locks right in. And all I do is I take off my nanonucleus end, attach it to this magic arm, and then I'm good to go. So about the shoulder rig, just to kind of give a look at it, everyone designing their own rig, that's kind of the fun of it though, is you really can kind of make it your own thing. And for me, the centerpiece of this whole system is, again, this handle that comes right underneath the camera for that weight distribution. This is, I feel perfectly comfortable holding this like that and knowing that this camera is balanced primarily based on that single handle. The second thing you can do with this setup is you can actually use the handle here, which is again that midpoint of weight distribution, and rest it right there on your shoulder. And this gives you a little more freedom with movement. Now I can kind of move around, and I still have my monitor usually out to here, and that way I can look down on the monitor, and I just have a little more freedom with moving. We have a pad in the back. Most of this stuff is by Nicey Rig, and you can use this all day. I did. I used this exact rig for a feature film that we shot in South Dakota, indie film. We shot it in 8 days. Everyone who was involved in that project worked extremely hard, and I hope that it all comes together. So I'll leave a link below for all the different pieces on my kit, on the cage and on the shoulder mount and all that good stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about the state of our industry. I've been a professional for the last 10 years working out in the field. I've seen camera bodies change. I started with a 7D Mark I, moved on to a 6D and an A7S and a GH3 and a GH4 and yada, 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 yada. So I don't have any allegiance to any one specific camera brand. I'm always just looking for the tool to get the job done that I need it to. And I think these prosumer level cine bodies are going to be the next step in evolution of smaller commercial projects, some weddings, stuff like that. And that's really exciting. I always live by the mentality that competition breeds innovation, and boy, are we in a place of innovation right now. Cinema lenses have never been cheaper. Siri now makes anamorphic lenses. Again, one more reason why I went with this particular body is you can get cheap anamorphic lenses, man, and that's incredible. So I want to hear your thoughts on where you think our industry is heading. Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Do you think it's going to create devaluation in our industry with how these cameras are so accessible? What's going to happen with big time productions in Hollywood? I think we're moving away from the smaller creatives who used to be DIY and into a BIY, a buy it yourself version of that, because the quality difference between the really high end, the middle end, and the low end is shrinking constantly. So I'm really curious to hear if anyone has input on if they think this is a good turn for the industry or if they're scared about being able to make money, because that's a real thing in our industry. So yeah, leave a comment. I will absolutely get back to you. This is my first YouTube video. This is something I told myself I would do for 2020. It was a goal. Have achievable goals. So that's exactly what this is. If I end up doing more of these, which I certainly hope I do, there'll probably be a lot of changes with everything with it. Maybe not my chaos of crazy workplace desk behind me. But I'll see you next time.